Welcome back. Now, some private security firms say that proposed Firearms Control Amendment Bill could make it difficult for some of its members and staff to respond to crime and protect communities. Now, the Police Ministry and the PSIRA gazetted a draft amendments which are aimed at strengthening gun control within the private security sector. This comes at a time where private security is on a rise in many residential areas, at a time where distrust within the South African police service is slowly growing. Joining me now, I'd like to welcome the Director of Vision Tactical, Yaseen Theba. Yaseen, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and Jazakallah so much for joining us.
Walaikum salam. Thank you for having me.
Yaseen, I think let's look at this this bill as a whole. What are some of the issues that private security organizations and yours as well are looking at and saying there has to be a review which allows organizations like yourself to still have powers to protect communities who are quite vulnerable to crime?
Well, I think our biggest issue with the draft recommendations on the bill is the fact that it's very, very vague. There's simple things that are left open to interpretation. For example, the recommended bill says ammunition of a reasonable amount. To many security companies, especially when responding to protest action, to the Zama issues that we're seeing in and around Johannesburg, reasonable amount of ammunition is very, very vague. And also it depends how many armed guards you have. We need to have ammunition in our armory to equip us so that we can be responsive no matter what the circumstances or no matter how long we're gonna have an issue for. For example, when we saw in the July unrest, there were weeks and months that went on where we were using rubber ammunition, supporting police on the ground. Laws like this, recommended laws like this, make it very, very difficult for us to interpret what the recommended amount of ammunition is, thus making it very, very difficult for us to respond. I think our biggest issue also is the fact that there's so many prohibited weapons, and in that list of prohibited firearms or prohibited weapons is handcuffs, tasers, rubber bullets, tear gas. We know how we need to deploy members, and we know what circumstances we need to run out and basically use such classified weapons, making it impossible for us to react and assist police, assist communities, and of course protect ourselves.
Yeah, this is what I want to ask with regards to the recommended amount of ammunition, because one really can't count given the criminals that you are dealing with on the street. And I know many private security firms either offer bodyguard services to certain members of the communities, and of course those who are circulating around various communities who do security, who do a lot of witnessing of what is currently happening to make sure that crime doesn't occur. And I think that's where a lot of security companies are raising concerns, that when there is these sort of crimes that are occurring, the fact that this bill is saying a recommended amount of ammunition, there really is no recommended amount of ammunition, because according to the criminals, they can fire as much as armory as they want.
So, we understand that the bill is designed to basically control illegal firearms, to get the illegal firearms off the streets. Our biggest issue is that you're already regulating companies that are registered. What about those companies that are not registered, not complying? And while we need to get more compliance around those companies, we feel that the new regulations is basically killing the regulated companies instead of protecting the regulated companies from the people that are not registered and breaking the law. The current laws that are there see to it that companies need to be registered, that the regulator visits them often. And what we're calling for is, let's draw a balance, let's call a middle line, and get Psira to comply, Psira to enforce the current laws, instead of burdening the regulated industry with additional laws that are not going to be upheld, and there's not going to be enforcement on those current laws. Again, I must ask the question, the minute there's an incident, who do the public call? And recently we took to our social pages asking who would you call in an emergency? And I mean, an overwhelming amount of people refer to the security company as the first point of call in an emergency. We've got members that are responding to armed robbers using high caliber firearms, responding to protest action, responding to Zamas who's using AK-47s. And without the right equipment, it basically makes it impossible for us to respond to those scenes, leaving the communities at a higher risk.
That's the thing, Yaseen, because if you were to look at the court of public opinion, they would still prefer private security, because the distrust within the South African police service is there for everybody to see. Either they're coming 15 minutes late or even not coming at all, whereas with private security, there's an instant response, whether, of course, you press the panic button or any sort of emergency button. And that speaks to just how fragile security is in South Africa, safety is in South Africa, and by that, public would prefer paying whatever amount it is to make sure that they have that peace of mind. And one may say that this bill right over here really curbs any chance of private security acting within the interests of the public.
Well, correct. It's the mandate of security companies to respond to private property, to ensure that private citizens are safe. That's our mandate. That's our contractual obligation. But we live in a time where even the police rely on private security companies for visual presence, for crime prevention operations, and campaigns like the E2 project, Operation Chanela, speak to the successes that they are because of these partnerships with private security and law enforcement. Bills like this go totally against the grain. And I mean, I think that's where our discussions are with the minister. Over the past few days, we've been having our ear very, very close to the ground with the police summit that's happening in Empress Palace at the moment. And we are engaging with law enforcement, with the minister's office, via our legal teams. We will be consulting with the minister's office and, of course, Psira, to ensure that these acts are balanced, to ensure that it allows us to continue with our operations and, of course, protect our members and protect communities.
Yaseen, you said, of course, your organization and I'm sure many others are currently speaking with the police minister, with the ministry itself. With the inputs that you are having, what is it that you'd like to see potentially change within this bill to make sure that private security still has a huge role to play within South Africans, for them to have that peace of mind, to have that security in a very fragile country that we have right now, with crime really being a big proponent of how we live in this nation?
Well, I think the biggest concern from the ministry is that the amount of illegal firearms. And I mean, we welcome initiatives to curb the amount of illegal firearms floating on our streets. However, we need to find a balance to ensure that the right people are equipped to deal with crime decisively. We cannot brush all the security companies with one brush and say that we need to disarm security companies totally. Private security has a major role to play in the safety of South Africans. I think we all can agree, including the Minister's Office, the National Commissioner's Office, and including officials at Psira, that private security and the private entities play a critical role in combating crime, especially when it comes to kidnappings, when it comes to vehicle theft, when it comes to visual presence and presence on the ground, combating minor crimes on the streets, in the townships. So I think we all agree that there has to be some sort of governance to regulate the firearms. We all want a safer South Africa, and I think through engagement with the ministry, with the private sector, we can find a balancing line where we can all make our country a safer place and safer for South Africans at large.
Yaseen, Jazakallah so much for joining us here on News in Focus on Hilaal TV. Much appreciated. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. That's Yaseen Theba, who is the Director of Vision Tactical. Of course, interesting how that's going to be developing as we see this amendment bill still in discussions. And the private security would argue that they're playing quite a huge role, given maybe just the lack of distrust that the public has within the South African police service. But the South African Police Service is still an arm of the state. It's still a huge entity of the state, but under-resourcing continues to be a major issue with regards to them. Well, that's all we have for you here on News in Focus. Tomorrow, Talking Point returns from myself, Firas Patel, and the rest of the team in Johannesburg. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.